Welcome to Speaking of Love, the podcast, with your host, LaToya. This podcast was created as a platform for spreading love. Welcome to Speaking of Love, the podcast, and I am your host, LaToya. I created this podcast in honor of my dad, who was an amazing guy. He had an infectious laugh, and his spirit was magnetic. He was the type of guy who made everybody feel like somebody special. If you were to place him in a crowded room of 100 people, my dad would be the smartest person in the entire room. He was an award-winning radio TV broadcast engineer for many years. Born and raised in the city of Detroit, he was one of the first to go to college in his family. And while attending Wayne State University, he developed a lifelong love affair with the game of basketball. He was the shortest point guard on the team, but he could slam dunk the basketball with either hand. By all outward appearances, my dad lived a rewarding life, but there were parts of him that were known to only him. On March 2nd of 2020, my dad's private struggles became public when he took his own life in a murder-suicide. When he died, a part of me died too. And since the tragedy, I have become an advocate for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. I also created this beautiful podcast in honor of my dad and others like him who are struggling with the effects of mental health challenges. My podcast, Speaking of Love, is named after a show my dad once hosted called Speaking of Sports. Thank you for taking the time to be here with me today as we take a journey in pursuit of the strongest magnetic force on the planet Earth, and that's love. My name is LaToya Bond, and I have a podcast called Speaking of Love. My podcast is dedicated to the memory of my dad who took his own life in a murder-suicide. Aside from that, I am a business owner. I have a home-based business. I am also a legal professional during my 9-to-5 day, and I am a person who operates her entire life on the premise of spreading love. It's the secret to my success. It's the secret to my longevity on this earth, and it's what keeps us going because love is the thing that makes all things beautiful. So that's why I'm here today to talk about my favorite subject in the whole wide world, and that's love. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Speaking of Love, the podcast. I am your host, LaToya Bond, and I am here today with a beautiful young lady by the name of Michelle Ciaramellano. I met Michelle at the Suicide Prevention Conference hosted by Kevin Song back in January. And when I met her and I looked into her background, I knew that she was someone that I wanted to have here on my podcast. So if you will please allow me a few minutes to introduce Michelle to you, I'm going to tell you all about this beautiful young lady here. Michelle is a licensed master social worker. She received her Bachelor of Social Work degree from Ferris State University and her Master of Social Work degree from Wayne State University. Michelle has been with Havenwyck Hospital in a variety of roles for over 17 years. Initially, Michelle worked as a lead social worker on the adult inpatient unit, then became the first director of partial hospital programs, and eventually transitioned to the business development team. Michelle's current title is Assistant Director of Business Development. With business development, Michelle spends much of her time in Oakland County building relationships with community partners. Michelle has taken an active role in the suicide prevention community. She's a safe talk trainer, an ASIST trainer, and is on the leadership board of the Oakland County Suicide Prevention Task Force. In addition to her role in the hospital, Michelle also has a private practice where she works with individuals in the criminal justice system and youths who are struggling with suicide. Please help me welcome Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Michelle. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to have you here because of your background in the world of suicide prevention, and I thought you would be a great fit for my platform and the purpose of this platform. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
So, Michelle, let's talk a little bit. I want to start with your early years. Talk to me about growing up as a young Michelle. What was life like for you growing up?
Well, I actually am from Illinois, so I grew up in Aurora, Illinois, and I have a twin brother and an older sister. I know, fun fact, I have a twin brother and an older sister. My parents are both in the helping kind of field. My mom was a nurse for a very long time, and then also had her own business where she sold safety supply and stuff for emergency medical services. She taught EMT classes. My father obviously supported her in that, and then he also went on his own journey of teaching. He has his PhD in disaster preparedness and weapons of mass destruction. We call him Mike the safety guy. So my whole life we have been focused on being careful and being safe, and yeah, that's kind of my background.
Wonderful. So at what point in your early years did you decide to go into social work?
Oh gosh. Well, it actually started, my grandmother, who was a huge influence in my life, was a volunteer at one of the local hospitals in our town. And so every summer when we were off school, we would go with her to help volunteer at the hospital. It was then called Mercy Center. I don't know what it's called now. And I loved it. We visited patients and stuffed pamphlets and, all sorts of things that whatever it is that they needed. And so she really taught me from the very beginning, giving back is important. And I remember leaving the hospital with her, always feeling really proud of what we did. And then in high school, I had an extra elective that I was able to take, and it was the first of its kind at my high school. And we were able to volunteer for the crisis line at Stone Manor, which is in Illinois as well. And I started learning, listening to crisis calls and seeing how much just a listening ear could really make a difference. I remember doing sunshine calls to the elderly population of just calling to say hello, how are you? And just how really being a listening ear could make a difference to so many people. I also had some experience with domestic violence that I thought I want to save every child and every woman on the planet. And so that really is what geared me towards wanting to be a social worker.
Wow, you have a very diverse background there. That's beautiful. What is a sunshine call? I've never heard of that.
It was really for people the older population who lived alone and just needed someone to call and check on them and say, hi, how was your day? Really just that human connection piece that they otherwise wouldn't have. So I made some really strong relationships. I volunteered once a week, and it was wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that led you to going for your master's in social work. So what was your educational journey like pursuing your master's degree and going down that road? What was that pathway like for you?
Well, knowing that if you have a bachelor's in social work, if you want to kind of go up beyond that, you had to get your master's degree. And so I was searching for schools in Michigan because I wanted to stay in Michigan because I love Michigan. For anybody who is not from Illinois, Michigan is just a beautiful state. I have made some really, really important friendships in college that I am so thankful for. It's also where I met my husband. So I chose to stay in Michigan, and Wayne State was a wonderful experience at the time. Many years ago when I went there for my master's, it was the #1 program for social work in the United States. It was, in the city of Detroit. It was just a wonderful experience. I was able to do my internship at Children's Hospital. And so I saw a variety of opportunities that social work could provide, working in a hospital system, inpatient, outpatient, all sorts of things. So it was a really wonderful experience. I made a lot of good relationships there as well, and some of which have really guided me to how I ended up at Havenwyck, actually. So.
Well, that was going to lead me to my next question. You have been working at Havenwyck Hospital for 17 years in a number of different capacities. So talk to me about that journey working at Havenwyck.
Overall, I am so thankful for my organization. It has allowed me to grow in so many different ways. I've always felt very supported by my leadership, even though it's ever changing. The relationships and that we have had and how they have supported me, I'm ever so grateful for. Seeing things in myself that I necessarily didn't see, or they could see things in me that I couldn't necessarily see in myself, I should say. And so that really led me to becoming the first director of Partial was an amazing opportunity. And that came kind of after 10 years of working inpatient. While working inpatient, I should kind of start there, I guess. Let me back up a bit. I was responsible for all of our MSW students. So we were a teaching hospital in that respect. So we had MSW students from Wayne State that would come, and we all helped to support them, the social work team. But then I became the lead. So that was primarily my responsibility for some time. And learning how I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed kind of molding, the future social workers of America, per se. That was a wonderful opportunity that I never would have done had my director at the time, Carol Polly, she's one of my mentors of my entire social career. I'm so thankful for her. Kind of led me down that path. So again, she saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. From there,
that's usually how a lot of great things are birthed as well.
Yeah.
People see the good in you, and it's like, I didn't even realize I had that in me. Well, they saw the good in you and they brought it out. That's wonderful.
Yes. She also encouraged me to be the first director of our Partial program. The Partial program is my absolute favorite level of care of all level of cares. I think that it's really impactful. It can really make a difference for anybody who's in crisis, but not yet needing inpatient level of care. So that kind of early intervention, intense treatment, and then they're able to go home at night to still be with their families and really apply what they learned during the day. So I think it's a really wonderful level of care and impactful. And while I was in that role, at the time, my CEO brought me over to our business development team and said, I need you to speak on Partial. So I created a PowerPoint, and that kind of started my public speaking journey that I, never in a million years ever thought that I would do. But it led me to this whole world outside of the hospital that I was able to really grow again. So meeting everybody in the community, being a part of something bigger, it's really been a wonderful experience.
Wow. Michelle, I really admire people who dedicate their lives to enhancing the lives of other people. And that's exactly what you have done. You're also a suicide prevention trainer. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to interview you today so that you can educate us a little more about suicide prevention and just it's a conversation that needs to be had, but it's not, people don't talk about it very often. And I want to know, in your role as a suicide prevention trainer, can you tell my audience a little bit about what that's like for you and what you do in that capacity?
Yeah. Um, Kind of starting to how I began on the suicide prevention journey, I think would help kind of paint the picture a little bit. Because I had spent so much time working inpatient, that's really could be viewed as like postvention. So after individuals have attempted suicide and end up in the hospital, there was a lot of work that I did on that side of it. And working with the families and seeing how it impacted them was something that I never truly realized affected me until I actually started enjoying the business development team, because it kind of removed me from the patient care side, and I realized, oh my gosh, it affected me too. The compassion fatigue that as clinicians we experience is very, very real. And I think until we kind of step back from our day-to-day grind, we don't even realize how much it affects us. So I actually went to an ASIST training as part of the business development team. And I kind of walked in thinking, I've been working in psych for, at that point, maybe 10, 12 years. I know everything there is to know. I definitely walked in with like a chip on my shoulder.
Mm,
And part of the ASIST training, which is applied suicide intervention skills training, it's learning about your attitude and your views surrounding suicide, which is something that we never really stopped to think about, or at least I never had.
mhm.
And we sat down and I just started bawling. I mean, I was crying for every patient I had ever lost, every family that had been affected. And then it was really at that time that I thought there has to be more. There has to be more efforts on the prevention part. Postvention is always going to have a purpose and it's a very, very important level of care. However, what can we do to really prevent people from getting to the point of an attempt or dying by suicide? How can we help them before we get to that? So then I became a Safe Talk trainer, which is a wonderful program as well, also by Living Works, that helps individuals learn how to be more suicide alert. So I started doing Safe Talk trainings, and then from there became an ASIST trainer, which is my absolute favorite training ever. And I think that the purpose behind it is awareness is knowledge. Knowledge is power. We have to help people understand that talking about our most deepest thoughts and our most difficult trials that we're going through is so important, that if we don't talk about it and we don't process it, we're going to get to the point of needing a postvention, or unfortunately not even having that opportunity because you would have then died by suicide.
Mm.
So reducing stigma is the biggest piece, allowing people to know it's okay to talk about it, it's okay to not be okay, and just being there and kind of, I'll talk to anybody that will listen to me, basically.
So, Michelle, can you talk to us? What are some of the warning signs of someone who may be contemplating suicide?
So there are very specific warning signs that we should really all look for, hopefully. Obviously, we can kind of look at it in three different themes of what people might say, what people might do, and what people might feel that could indicate that they're having thoughts of suicide. So things that people might say can look like, I can't take it anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to disappear, right? Kind of those statements that are going to make you think, I think I need to explore that more. What do you mean by that? But often as a society, we really dismiss those things like, oh, they're having a bad day. right? We don't explore it any further because we may not be suicide alert or aware that that could be a warning sign for suicide. Things that people might do that could indicate that they're having thoughts of suicide. That can look like a variety of things: engaging in high risk behavior, making a plan, withdrawing from activities they previously enjoyed. And that, I think, is really difficult, especially for our youth or people that really their primary support is online. I've had many youth that their whole world is online. They have an online community. They have a boyfriend in Australia. They have, this community that they connect with, and it's only virtual, which is wonderful in some ways, but it might not be as obvious to a family member or even a teacher that they're withdrawing from those things, because it's just not as obvious as they're not going to hockey practice every day.
Exactly.
So we have to really kind of understand the in-depth things that people are going through and how they actually spend their time as well. And then what people are feeling. Obviously, there's the obvious piece of they're really, really down. They're feeling very sad. They are feeling depressed. The anxiety. A lot of people identify with anxiety, feeling that it's an easier or less stigmatized statement to make. But somebody who's experiencing severe anxiety to the point that they might feel like they have bugs crawling on them, they will do anything to get out of their skin because it's so uncomfortable. So that could certainly indicate that they're having thoughts of suicide as well. This is a really small list. I think each category can really be stretched. There's so many things. And just because an individual is kind of feeling down, maybe they are withdrawing from activities, maybe they are saying statements like, I can't take it anymore. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are having thoughts of suicide. But if we don't ask, then we don't know. And so the emphasis really becomes on having to ask that question if a person is having thoughts of suicide, and being comfortable with the question, and then knowing what to do from there.
So, you're right, Michelle. A lot of people are not comfortable using the word suicide. So they might beat around the bush, or they'll say, well, are you having thoughts of harming yourself, or are you feeling okay? Do you believe that it's best for the individual to just clearly ask and use the word suicide? I noticed you haven't been yourself lately. You seem a little down and out. Are you thinking of suicide? Is that the correct way? Is that the correct way to approach someone that we speculate maybe thinking of taking their own life?
Yes, absolutely. You actually segue to that perfectly. You're not going to just walk down the hall and say, hey, Joe, are you having thoughts of suicide, right? We're going to let the person know that we've noticed specific things about them that could potentially be warning signs. And those warning signs can sometimes be connected to suicide. And that's why we're going to ask the question, are you having thoughts of suicide? So we would absolutely say, like, you've been missing work. You've not been going to school. I see that you've been withdrawing and not going to hockey practice. You're not caring for yourself like you typically do. I know, normally you shower every day, and it looks like you haven't showered in many. You're wearing the same clothes. Like, you normally take pride in your appearance, that sort of thing. I'm worried about you. And you begin that conversation of, I'm here for you. I'm noticing these things specific to you, and I'm worried. From there, then you're going to connect that with suicide and ask the question, are you having thoughts of suicide? It's really, really important to ask the question clearly and directly, because if you don't, you might not get the answer that you actually need. Often people that have thoughts of suicide are not looking at suicide as a way of harm or harming themselves, but they're looking at it as a reprieve from the pain that they're experiencing. So it's not the same thing. People that have used self-harm as a coping skill, be it a poor coping skill, they may not have thoughts of suicide, right? And so thoughts of harming yourself and thoughts of suicide are not always interchangeable. So we have to really be specific in what we're asking so that we get the answer that we need in order to connect them with someone who can help them further.
Oh, so if someone does reveal to you, yes, Michelle, I have been thinking of suicide. I don't want to live anymore. As the receiver of that kind of information, what's our next step? How do we help the person?
Well, we have to partner with them. We're certainly not going to say, gosh, I guess you need help, right? And send them on their way. We're going to partner with them and make sure that we get them to the place that they need to go. And that can really be different based on the severity of their symptoms, their willingness for treatment. There's so many factors in that where they're going to go next. I would say first and foremost, 988 is a wonderful resource for individuals, clinicians, anybody who doesn't know the next step. Not everybody is trained in suicide intervention, and that's okay. But we certainly we want to make sure that the person that is having thoughts of suicide is connected with the person that can actually effectively help them. So if you don't know where to start at 988. They can kind of help triage. They may have a therapist that you can get an emergency session with. Let's call the therapist. They may not want to talk to their therapist. Perhaps they're like, you know what, I need help right now. I need to go to the emergency room. So there's a variety of things, of places that people can go. Havenwyck Hospital, our intake department is open 24/7. All of our intake clinicians are either master's level clinicians or registered nurses. So they can help triage as well. So you can call Havenwyck anytime if you are in Oakland County or even outside of Oakland County. And need help really understanding where to go next. Mm-hmm. And you can always call me too. Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to help as well.
Thank you for that, Michelle. What's your email address?
It is, it's my first last name at uhsinc.com.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Got it. I'm going to post it in the show notes so that people can see it. And then I also have the suicide prevention, the suicide lifeline number, 988. You can call 988 just as you would in an emergency when you call 911. There's now the 988 hotline. It's been in establishment, I think, since about July of 2022. Mm-hmm. So we've had this resource here, and it's becoming very common and popular, very successful. So we're so happy to have that. Michelle, if someone is watching this podcast right now, or they're listening and they're having thoughts of suicide, they're tired, life has just been hard, they don't see a way out of the crisis that they're facing at this moment, what words of encouragement would you give them to hold on just a little bit longer?
I think it's important for people to know that they are not alone. There is, at any given time, more than 12 million people, adults in the United States, that are having thoughts of suicide. So even though you as a person, if you're having these thoughts, you feel like you are so alone, you are not. Mm-hmm. And remember that there is always hope. Research actually indicates that individuals, even up until the time of their suicide attempt, those that survived their suicide attempt, there was doubt even up until that last moment. And so I think that we have to remember that you don't necessarily have to choose life. You don't have to choose death. But right now, we're going to just choose to be safe. Right now, we're going to connect with someone who can help us further and hope that this will, that your thinking will change. And it will if you do go through the right connections and get the right people to actually help you and connect you with those that can help. There is lots of room for hope and support in our community. There's so many resources that are available to people. So you are not alone, and there is hope.
Wow. Thank you, Michelle. And I'm sure that someone watching right now, listening, needed to hear that. We have a lot going on in the world today, and it's not always a sunshiny day every day of our lives. But we have beautiful people like you, Michelle, who've dedicated their lives to helping people in need. So thank you for all that you do.
You're welcome.
What do you love most about your work in the world of social work? What do you love most about your job?
Oh, so many things, actually. I love that I am able to be in the community and really find what the community needs and kind of plug it in. Um, there's actually some changes happening with my position right now that I'd love to share if that's okay.
Sure.
Um, Havenwyck Hospital is owned by UHS, which is a large hospital system in the United States. And we actually have 3 sister facilities in Michigan and then 1 coming in 2025. So ultimately, there will be 5 UHS hospitals in the state. And I am now going to be responsible for representing all of those hospitals, which are Havenwyck, of course, Cedar Creek Hospital, which is in St. John, Beaumont Behavioral Health, which is in Dearborn, Forest, which is in Grand Rapids. And then in 2025, there will be another hospital opening in Byron Center called Southridge. And so I am actually now able to reach people all over the state, connecting them with resources in their territory or in their area, whatever really makes sense for them. We have specialized programming or older adult programming, eating disorder programming, trauma. We have a virtual partial at Forest View, which is a really wonderful option for those that want to receive services virtually. And then we have partial hospital program, which again is my favorite, at all of our locations, so that people can go really from kind of all over wherever they are in the state. So that's a really exciting new piece to what I'm doing. I'm going to be responsible for some new areas in the state as well. So I'll be reaching and kind of venturing out of Oakland County. But it's a wonderful opportunity to reach more people, be able to connect them with more service lines and opportunities for help, no matter where they are. So.
Wow, you are amazing, totally amazing. Is there someone in your life who inspired you to be the woman that you are today?
Oh my gosh. I think that's kind of a different periods of my life. I think there's been different influences, right? Like as a child, my grandmother was a huge influence. My mom is an extremely strong woman who has always been a listening ear for me. I've always been able to tell her anything without judgment. My father has really spread his wings to help people all over the United States as well. So I've been guided by them. My husband is my biggest fan, my biggest supporter, the best partner. And I think that he has really allowed me to grow. He has given me confidence that I didn't have. And I'm really, really thankful for that.
Oh, that's so sweet. Beautiful, beautiful. Michelle, I created this podcast in honor of my dad. He took his own life in a murder-suicide. He murdered his wife and then moments later took his own life. And when this happened, it really destroyed me for a while. It was very difficult to face the world knowing that my father did such a horrible thing. So I wanted to do something to honor him when he died. And my father was a radio TV broadcast host. He worked for Channel 7 News. He was a wonderful person. He was smart. He was funny. He was a big teddy bear. He had all these great things going for himself. So at one point in his life, he was a radio host. He had a radio show. The radio show was called Speaking of Sports. So when he died, I wanted to do something to honor him. And I thought, maybe I could create a radio program in his honor, but I don't know anything about sports. But I know all about love. So Speaking of Love, the podcast is created in honor of my dad's former radio show, Speaking of Sports. So the $1 million question that I ask all of my guests who sit before me, Michelle, is how do you define love? Speaking of love.
Speaking of love, I think unconditional, open support, really all the things I mentioned about my husband. He has shown me love in one of the greatest ways, I think, that anybody can. Support, guidance, a listening ear, a partner, a confidant. Yeah.
I love it.
Lots of other little things, but just I think that's the most important piece. Being a listening ear and not judging and building me up, as opposed to breaking me down.
Love is the thing that makes all things beautiful. I say that all the time. Michelle, it's been a pleasure having you here on Speaking of Love, the podcast. I know my dad is looking down and with pride. And I just want you to know that I really appreciate you for bringing forth a wealth of knowledge and your expertise to my platform to help others, to serve people who are in need, because your work is so important and it's vitally critical at this time in our lives. So thank you for being here as an expert, a suicide prevention trainer. Again, if anyone wants to reach out to Michelle, I'm going to put her contact information in our show notes. Michelle, is there anything else you'd like to share with my audience before we conclude the interview?
I would like to say thank you for listening to me, and never be afraid to ask for help. That's the message that we really have to share. Never be afraid. No problem is too small or too big. That there are people here that can meet you where you are, and help is available.
Yes, it is. We have someone viewing us on Facebook, my friend Carrie Solo. She has also been touched by suicide. She lost her companion a few years ago, and she's watching. Carrie says, "Thank you, ladies. Bless you both." We appreciate you for tuning in, Carrie. I have one last question for you, Michelle, before we go. When the pages of your life are reviewed and your mission here on the planet Earth is complete, what do you most want to be remembered for?
Oh my gosh. I want to make a difference. I really do. I want to help. I want people to know that I was a hard worker, and that I did everything I can, really to help people in any capacity. And I want to be remembered for being a good mom. My daughters are my primary purpose, and a higher purpose, I guess, than myself. So I also want to be remembered for that too, that I was a good mom, and I helped guide them into beautiful little helping people, and that I was a good leader, and that maybe some nugget of something that I said helped somebody somewhere. So yeah, I guess.
Well, Michelle, you have already achieved your intention because you're doing exactly that right now. So thank you for all you do. I have another comment here from Keith Carter. He is my fiance. He's watching us live on YouTube, and he said, "Thank you for the wisdom and the assistance on helping people get over the ignorance in our community with help of saving lives." Thank you, Keith. Thank you for your comment, and thank you for watching and tuning in with us today. If anyone is feeling suicidal at this moment and you need a little help, don't be afraid. As Michelle has mentioned, get help. You can call 988, the Suicide Lifeline number, and there are trained professionals there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that they can help you with your crisis. And just be patient and just know that what you're going through, there is help. There is help. And if you don't want to call, you can text the word help to 741-741. Again, it's 741-741, and you can text the word help, and they can help you in that way as well. Michelle, thank you for being here. You are amazing. I bow to your excellence. Thank you for blessing my platform with your presence. This means a lot to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it
so
much.
Yes, and thank you all so much. This was episode 135 of Speaking of Love, the podcast, and I will be back next month with another episode of Speaking of Love. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for being here. Have a great day, everyone.